This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado, Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
New Icy Hot. Nighttime recovery. Relieves pain at nighttime while your body recovers. Icy Hot. You're so back.
Encore une fois. This is the inside story of Paris 2024. 1 year on, one more time.
There's points when you're sighting and you can just see the Eiffel Tower in the background. It's a really amazing location.
Two British athletes in taekwondo action, Tokyo silver medalist Bradley Tyndon and double Olympic champion Jade Jones in her fourth games. The men's USA basketball team, ranked number one in the world, take on Serbia, ranked fourth in the semi-finals in Paris. France, Germany, the other semi.
This is Encore Une Fois, the inside Paris story from Anything But Footy. 1 year on, one more time. And well, who would have thought there's only 4 days of this short series of the podcast left to go? This is our little look back at Paris 2024, some of our memories and experiences from being out in Paris and covering the games for official Olympic broadcaster Talk Sport. And the day for the diary is Thursday, the 8th of August. It's day 13.
And I had a baguette on the Champs-Elysees today. That was one of my highlights. I hadn't had a baguette at all across Paris, and today was the day. I stood in the middle of the Champs, having gone to a baguette shop and bought like a ham baguette. It was great.
Whilst we're talking gastronomy, I discovered in week 2 that our favourite little bar stroke restaurant opposite my hotel in Bercy did this amazing French onion soup. And it was one of those meals that, despite just being French onion soup, had so much in it, it really filled you up. And when you're out of the Olympics doing kind of long days on the road where you don't kind of know where your next meal is going to come from, when you're next going to eat, that French onion soup really kept me going some days, because I might sometimes have that at lunchtime, knowing that I wouldn't be back to somewhere where I could get something to eat till like gone midnight, because I'd be at 2 or 3 events between then and when I finally finished. So yeah, you had your baguette, I had my French onion soup.
And I think that second week, we also met quite a bit more in the evenings at the end of your athletics. You would come back and I would come to your, because my hotel was previously advertised and closed at 10 o'clock at night, had no food or anything. So we'd come back and we tend to eat or have a couple of beers, and then I'd just get a cab back to my hotel from memory. I think we did that a bit more in the second week.
Which must have been quite late when you think about it.
It would have been.
Definitely would have been midnight plus.
Yeah.
And we went back to that great bar restaurant, very Parisian scene, with all the seats and the tables outside, and they had big screens up, and obviously on French television they were replaying all the highlights of the day. It just became such a sort of a nice little wind down. I'm not sure the first beer every night really touched the sides.
No, I don't think it did,
because it was hot and we were sweating. We'd probably just come back. I'd definitely just come back from the Stade de France and on the metro and everything. And I remember getting that first beer, and it would pretty much be down in one, but with no effects. Didn't really have any impact.
But we were very good. We only had 2 beers. 2 beers was about the limit, because we all had to get up and start the next day. You always do a piece into TalkSport Breakfast, TalkSport 2 Breakfast. And this was, I went on a run from this point on, where every morning I was like, right, I'm getting up and I'm going to 2 of these events. Not a run.
You meant you went running.
No, definitely not. But this was the first of my. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to go to Michael's Bridge, the Pont Alexandre de Troyes bridge, and it was there for the marathon swimming. And again, I knew the venue. I knew where I had to go. I got some great pictures of the Eiffel Tower. Leah Chris from Great Britain was in the 10-kilometer swim. The sun was shining. This was. I did some hits into TalkSport 2 breakfast because they were suddenly like, John, are you actually there? And I was like, yes, I am. I can do some reports. So I had to suddenly find out who the other athletes were and who was winning. I think the Netherlands won gold. Leah came down in 20th, but I managed to get an interview with her quite quickly afterwards. Obviously, she wasn't a medalist, so she walked through the mix zone, your favourite mix zone, but it wasn't quite as busy for the marathon swimming. And TalkSport grabbed her. I could see she had a British cap on and managed to speak to Leah. I think we'd spoken to her on Zoom. So yeah, it was just a nice way to start the day. And what it meant was that I was then in a place right next to the Grand Palais where the Taekwondo was happening second week. And I then spent my day with Katie Shanahan, who was reporting on the Taekwondo that day. And the reason why I went there as well was because Jade Jones was fighting. Now, we've talked about Team GB having slightly troubled games with various things. They knew about this one, that Jade Jones had failed to supply a drugs test in December before the games, but she hadn't been banned by UKAD, hadn't really done any interviews about it. The UK anti-doping agency said there was no fault or negligence for the missed test on her part due to a loss of cognitive capacity. Now, she always said that she denied taking drugs, but she had failed to supply a drugs test. She hadn't really done any stuff before, and she went into the Taekwondo, and in the first round, the double Olympic champion lost, and she was out. And afterwards, she admitted that she absolutely froze on the spot and just could not deliver. But Katie interviewed her. A lot of senior Team GB people were there for obvious reasons, and it was one of those moments of the games, and it was quite nice working with Katie actually, because I was doing my updates but just based next to her, and we were just chit-chatting, and it felt like we were passing ideas around. I was nicking a few lines, she was doing, and it felt like we were a bit of a team. And to be honest, I hadn't realized I hadn't really had that for a week and a half, because a lot of the time when we were in Rio, me and you would hang out together, or Rich or whatever, but because of what the roles that we were doing, we were very individual, weren't we? We were like, you've got to go there, you've got to go there. So actually it was quite nice to just sit at a desk and work with someone, and me and Katie had a really good day. Unfortunately, Jade Jones didn't.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I think obviously WhatsApp was the big friend, and we had various little WhatsApp groups going on. We had one just for the guys on the ground in Paris. We had this brilliant service, this stats and facts thing. So we had some lots of statisticians and historians beavering away in the background that would just be sending you stuff that you could just populate your commentaries or reports with, which was, I don't even know who those guys were.
No, they were great though.
They weren't something I organised, but I hope they're listening because they were amazing. And whoever they are, I would hire them or book them again. They were just absolutely fantastic. I got a little bit of that because every night after the athletics program would finish, the show on TalkSport would go on a little bit later. That was the kind of the daily, if you like, the daily hour, the Daily Thompson hour at the end of that was what he would come on and look back at the night of athletics. So I would go up and sit with the team generally at that point. And so I would have that little bit of downtime before we headed off. But it's interesting, obviously, you were covering what was a pretty serious story on that day. I began my day at Team GB House. I'd gone to see the cyclists, the men and the women from the previous day. And Mark England was there, the chef de mission. So essentially the kind of the team manager, the Thomas Tuchel of Team GB, if you like. And we know Mark really well. I've lost count of the number of interviews we've done with Mark over the years. He's been chef de mission through subsequent editions of the games. Big supporter of TalkSport, big fan of TalkSport, was a guest in the studio in the build-up, big supporter of what you and I did. And so I sat down and he was like, here we are, a couple of days to the end. We'll do a little kind of brief where we were. And I think the occasion was, I think Team GB had won their 1,000th medal in their history. But I was also very aware that back at home, and we're very much in an Olympics bubble, but back at home, we had had the murders in Southport during the first week of the games, which we were very removed from, and wasn't something really on our agenda, but obviously at home was dominating the news agenda. And then, as we know, that developed into civil unrest in many of the towns and city centres, something that had been prompted by social media. And I'd had a conversation with my youngest daughter, either the previous night or that morning, and she would have been 11, and she was scared. And she was saying to me, Dad, when are you coming home? I'm scared of what's happening. I live in the northeast of England. Hartlepool had been one of the places that had been particularly badly hit with this civil unrest. And she was like, I'm worried it's going to come to where we live, our town. Why do I tell this story now? Because I started speaking to Mark England about that. And it became a conversation. And you've talked before about, when you do an interview with someone at Team GB House, where generally it's medalist, it's happy, it's nice, it's fun, it's fluffy. But actually you want to do something that's a bit different, that moves the story on or sets the agenda for the next day. And Mark England and I developed this conversation about what was happening at home and how Team GB, with gender equality, being a very diverse team, represented within 350 odd people the population at home. And what Team GB were doing in Paris, the team, the support staff, the fans that were out there as well, was something that the people back in the UK could perhaps cling to as a small beacon of hope as to how things could be in a parallel universe.
It must have been hard getting that phone call from your daughter.
Yeah, because you're away, and obviously I was the first to arrive in Paris, and I was the last to leave. So I'd actually gone out the Monday before.
I think the Monday.
The Monday. I think I'd started traveling on the Sunday and had a stopover down south. Can't remember exactly. So yeah, it'd been a long time, and where I lived was absolutely fine. There were no issues, but you've got an 11-year-old, you've just got children that are, probably way more news savvy than we were at their age, because they're on social media platforms and news is a 24/7. We didn't have to wait. They don't have to wait till 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock to get their news, like we did. It's on the internet. But then you've also got misinformation, which is being shared, which they're also potentially seeing as well. So it was just a conversation I had with home that fed into something I don't think we had really looked at or reported on in Paris, because it was something that was happening. I was aware it was happening, but it wasn't relevant to me. And suddenly it became very relevant. And when I spoke to Mark England about it, and Mark's a family man, and Mark and I share stories about our kids, and we have done, and he talks about where he's going with his family after the games are finished, and we do. And when I told him about this, he was like, I think that's a really good thing that as Team GB, with our bigger, wider societal responsibility, we should reflect. And Mark and I did reflect it. I think some of that interview is on the TalkSport YouTube channel. We filmed a lot of those interviews as well. But yeah, it was a really just sort of interesting departure, if you like, from what we'd been doing day to day.
And what I've said throughout this series is that these games for Team GB were a challenge, not just for gold medals, but also with some of the stories that weren't sporting stories that were off the agenda. You talked about the rugby sevens, we talk about Jade Jones, you talk about Charlotte Dujardin. But what they always do, and what I love about Team GB, is they front up. And Mark England could have sat there and said, well, I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm not going to get involved in what's going on at home. We're just winning medals. That's my job. But he's so aware, and they're so aware of their brand and what it means to people. And I think well done for them for for always fronting up, and that's why I said they had some of the senior people were at that taekwondo because they want to make sure that people get what they needed. We had to ask Jade Jones questions, and Katie Shanahan did it, and she did a great job, and I was just there to kind of support her as well. I actually stayed that evening. I wanted to come to the athletics, which we'll come to in a moment, but I stayed that evening because Bradley Sinden, who won, of course, silver in Tokyo, and was a two-time world champion, was progressing really nicely throughout the day. And that's the thing with taekwondo. You start in the morning, but you carry on right through till 10 o'clock at night, fighting throughout the day. But he then surprisingly lost his semi-final bout and actually injured his knee at that point. So he then withdrew from the bronze medal contest. So he ended up with no medals whatsoever. Unfortunately, for some reason, because everyone knew I was there, I didn't get an interview with him. He wasn't in the mix zone because he didn't compete, and for some reason it was an oversight. But I didn't get invited to a quick press briefing that he did. So I was travelling home on the metro, and I said to Team GB, I'll do him whenever. And so they messaged me and said he's available now on Zoom. So I got off, literally just ran off the metro, didn't know where I was, looked up, oh, I'm at Notre Dame. Not exactly the nicest place in the world at sunset to be sitting down, but I sat on a street corner, had 5G, got my MacBook out, and did a Zoom interview with Bradley Sinden, who was really good at speaking, and I'm glad I got to him. But as the sun went down, hopefully not on his taekwondo career, hopefully he'll be back. But I did look around me and go, I'm sitting here with a MacBook on a street corner doing these interviews. But fortunately, everything was fine, and we carried on our evening. And Noah Lyles was the big story, of course.
Yeah, I'd been to the diving in the afternoon. Saw Jordan Holden and Jack Law. The diving venue was next to the athletics venue, so that often made sense for me to stop off there. Saw Jack Law on the end of a really nasty question from a journalist. I won't name the journalist or indeed the organisation, but basically he had come up short in one of his 6 dives. He finished 7th, but he'd won a synchro medal, and I think his contribution to the sport of diving is immense and underestimated. And I don't think he deserved this rather sort of nasty pointed question that he got first up as well in the interview, not even saved down the line. When you talk about managing the interview situation, sometimes you go over the killer question at the end, but this journalist went right for it. And to be fair to Jack, he looked at the person and just said, I'm not sure that is the question I would have opened this with. And then the interview went downhill from there. And I don't think the journalist got much usable content from Jack Law that day. Now, you do need to ask questions of people that are in receipt of UK sport funding and public money when they come up short at events, but there's ways and means of asking that question. Plus, also, you need to look at what Jack Law has contributed overall to the sport, to Team GB, beyond what he's done in sport as well. Another one that's talked about mental health challenges quite openly, and it seemed very unfair to me. Then across to the stadium, as you say, Noah Lyles night, men's 200 meters final night. Very quickly, because we'll finish probably with that. I'd made Femke Bol cry that night. Another one, because she'd only won a bronze, and she was very tearful.
Yeah,
and said, I can't believe that I choose tonight to put in my worst performance when I should have been putting in my best performance. You'd remember she'd won a gold in the mixed relay, coming from like half a lap behind to go past the US and the UK or GB. So she did have a gold, but she was very tearful in her individual event. But yeah, we were thinking, is this the night Noah Lyles was going to do the double?
As we said earlier, he wanted to win both the 100, the 200, the relays, maybe both relays. But it became pretty apparent at the start of the 200 meters that he was in no way going to win this, was it?
No, and we mentioned, if you were listening to one of the previous episodes, I interviewed him the night he collected his medal. I was glad that I didn't get COVID, because during the course of the evening, it emerged that Noah Lyles had tested positive for COVID shortly after receiving his medal. So Letsili Tobogo, for the record, won the gold medal in the 200 meters. I remember asking Letsili, because we were hearing these rumors, these whispers that something wasn't right. He had collapsed on the track at the end. Their wheelchair had been
Did he win a bronze?
He won a bronze, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah, but he collapsed. Didn't look. I remember Adam Jamili in the Talksport commentary say he didn't look like the Noah Lyles we know. Letsili Tobogo said pretty much the same thing. I said to Letsili, has he got COVID? He said, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to catch up with him. And the thing I remember most was the NBC, the American TV network, who have the rights to the games, the first interview position, and their reporter is a former athlete himself, came sprinting past me with a slightly more out of condition sort of camera team following him because Noah Lyles was taken off in this wheelchair and wasn't going to come through the interview zone. And they're NBC. Essentially, they own the games. They fund it to a great tune. So they were like, well, we're still going to get our interview
wherever he is.
With Noah Lyles, wherever he is, we are getting that interview. I thought to myself, I'm not getting one with him tonight. And they went sprinting off after him, and I don't know where they went racing off around the stadium. I subsequently found, I think, the interview on the internet, on social media afterwards. But yeah, and then the statement came from US Track and Field that he tested positive for COVID, and there lies a big debate.
Well, it dominated for the next 24 hours, probably more, to be honest. I remember doing pieces with Talksport about it, and as you did, and interviewing everyone about it, because it was, well, did he know? Did he isolate himself? Because there wasn't official protocol, but everyone had their own protocol. And if you were at Team GB, like Adam Peaty, you would get isolated. And we know Team GB suffered from some of the press officers who weren't very well either. And everyone had their own systems, but there wasn't unlike Beijing and Tokyo, where the Olympics were in charge of it. And it became apparent that no one really knew, and that he know himself. That was a bit uncertain. It dominated things, didn't it? And he quickly then pulled out of the relays, and both relays.
Yeah, I had debates. I was going to say arguments, debates with people back at home, live on the radio, about whether he was right to compete. I remember doing an interview where Ray Parlour was in the studio at Talksport, and he said, I think he was right to compete. This is his one opportunity every 4 years. So if he felt that he could compete, then why wouldn't he? And I made the point that, we'd just come through a global pandemic where we, all got used to social distancing and isolation and all the rest of it. Why would you potentially put other people at risk? You're sat in a call room, which is quite a small space before the race. At the end of the race, you're embracing and hugging and shaking hands with people. And he did know he had COVID at that point, because there were pictures of him with his mask on and everything else. Why would you put other athletes at risk? And we argued, debated, counter-argued, and I said, I put the thing back to Ray Parlour. And, if you had a illness on the eve of the FA Cup final, what would your manager back in the day, what would Arsene Wenger have done? He would have removed you from the team setup, wouldn't he? He would have taken you out of it, because he wouldn't have wanted you to affect the rest of the squad. And he was like, no, I would have hidden it to try and still play. And there's no right or wrong answer to it. I sort of sided, I think, with what the guys in the commentary were saying, the likes of Nigel Adderley and Adam Jamili, which I think it was pretty irresponsible to go ahead and run. But obviously the offshoot of it was that there wasn't a massive COVID outbreak amongst sprinters or the American team in the final few days. So maybe they got it right. I don't know.
Katarina Johnson-Thompson started her heptathlon that day as well. We'll talk more about that in the next episode, and how Michael managed to get an interview with her because of the relationships that she had with our Talksport team. We'll talk about that in the next episode, but we'll just finish with a couple of other headlines. A gold medal for British sailing down in Marseille. The women's kite, Ellie Aldridge, on the final day won a gold medal. It ensured that British sailing didn't end up empty-handed, which it was looking that way for us for a moment. We obviously talked about the bronze earlier on in the week in the windsurfing. Cindy Ngamba won bronze in the women's boxing 75-kilogram class after a semi-final loss, but became the first ever athlete to win a medal for the IOC Refugee Olympic team. She, of course, trained with GB Boxing, Sheffield Steel she is made of, very much there. And then the Bercy Arena. We've talked about it a lot. We talked about it at the start about dinners and a restaurant and the odd beer here and there. Well, France beat Germany, who were the world champions, in the men's basketball semi-finals at the Bercy Arena, and Team USA defeated Serbia to set up the final that everyone wanted, the USA versus France in the days to come.
Yeah, I just want to say on boxing, actually, obviously the big boxing story of the second week as we got to Roland Garros was Iman Khalif. And we haven't spoken about that. And it's not that we're avoiding the story. This is our reflections on what we did in Paris.
Yeah.
And neither of us really covered the boxing. We had Dave Farrer and Spencer Oliver, the commentary team, who were picked out in the citation, by the way, when TalkSport picked up the British Press Award for Best Audio Coverage. They were mentioned specifically for what they said and did in their coverage of Iman Khalif. And we had Joe Ankia, who I think did the only English language interview at the boxing. So it's not something we're ignoring. It was obviously something that was happening and we were aware of, but it just wasn't something that we were covering. This is Encore Une Fois, the inside Paris story from Anything But Footy. 1 year on, one more time.
Encore Une Fois, Paris 2024, one more time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network. Dreaming of blissful summer days and creamy popsicles? Capture sun-drenched memories with the Orange Vanilla Dream Hydration Multiplier from Liquid IV. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water can help hydrate you better than water alone. Live your summer dream with Liquid IV. Tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and get 20% off your first order with code INDULGE20 at checkout.